Welcome back to the Prolworks channel. My name is John. I received a custom order for a set of ring boxes. The client supplied the wood blanks, which consisted of some pretty cool stuff. Desert ironwood, curly koa, Brazilian rosewood, and some redwood burl. Since I had such a limited amount of material, I made a test box out of maple to work out any kinks in the design and process. I altered the normal milling process a bit. These pieces were small enough that I didn't need the planer. I went from the joiner to the table saw to the drum sander to yield 2" by 6" blanks that were exactly 3/4 of an inch thick. Each box would use 2 of these to create a perfect 1.5" cube. These pieces going through the drum sander alone could give poor results and result in a little bit of snipe, so I used a little plywood sled and some double-sided tape to get the job done. I took multiple passes to sneak up on the perfect thickness. I generally keep 80 grit paper on the drum, and I found that is the happy medium of grits for this machine. Anything coarser leaves deep streaks, and anything finer can clog up and slow the machine down. The client wanted the cubes to be absolutely perfect and maintain sharp edges and corners. This meant I couldn't hide any imperfection with chamfers or roundovers. The magnets that hold each half together had to be placed perfectly, and for those reasons I used my CNC router. I drew up the design in AutoCAD, imported it into Fusion 360, created the tool paths, and sent them to the machine. There were 2 different tool paths with 2 bits used here. The first was a drilling operation with a V-bit. This provided markers for where to drill the magnets and the recess that would hold the rings. I didn't drill the holes with the router because my regular drill bits provided a better fit with the magnets. The other operation was a contour path that cut the outside of each half. I used an 1/8" end mill for this. I used tabs to hold the piece in place, but for some reason I was left with an onion skin at the bottom that I had to sand away later. I left a few thousandths of stock on the initial contour and came back with 2 finishing passes to clean everything up. And as a side note, this was my first time using Fusion 360, so I would estimate I spent twice as much time fiddling with the design and toolpath than I did actually making these boxes. But now I'm more comfortable with the software, which should help me in future projects. I considered making some work holding jigs to streamline the process, and that's sort of what those holes in front of the workpiece are, but with only 4 boxes to make, it was quicker to just re-zero the machine for each operation. To minimize bit changes, I would swap the order of the tool paths for each box. Their first one had the drilling operation first and the contour second, and then the next one would have the contour first and the drilling second. Rinse and repeat. I also considered milling out the hole for the ring, but figured I would save the wear and tear on my router bit and let the Forstner bits take care of the job. This also saved some time because pocketing out a hole in this dense wood took a few minutes per half. With the work done by the CNC, I could use the drill press to actually drill the holes. The magnets I used are 1/8" in diameter by 1/4" long. I used an 1/8" brad point bit, which worked perfectly because the brad point found a little dimple and self-aligned before drilling. You can see that the magnets have a piston-like fit. With the router bit, this fit was way too loose and probably would have messed up with the alignment. In the past, I've drilled holes that allow me to secure the magnets with a press fit, but for these I'll use CA glue to hold everything in place. The hole for the ring was drilled out using 2 Forstner bits, both of which are 1 and 1/8" in diameter. The first bit does most of the work, but as you may know, the brad point leaves a small hole at the bottom. To work around that, I have a second Forstner bit with the brad point ground off. This leaves a flat bottom, which looks nicer than the hole a brad point would leave. With the hole partially drilled, the second bit can find its way without the point and get the rest of the hole drilled out. Tabs and onion skin left from the CNC router were removed at the bandsaw. This left me with the 8 halves of the boxes and a bunch of sanding to do. I used the oscillating belt sander to flush up everything, but I was very careful not to remove too much material. The rest of the sanding was done by hand. I started at 120 grit and worked my way up to 150, 220, 320, 400, and lastly 1200. Oftentimes, I'll use some of my 5-inch orbital discs against the granite plate, but I found during my test box that the thin layer of fabric on the back of the disc was causing the box to pillow a bit. I switched to normal sandpaper and was able to keep all of the faces perfectly flat. I also made sure to go relatively slow, especially on the lower grits. You can get into a rhythm, but this could cause the piece to skip along the paper and possibly chip an edge or corner. At 400 grit, I raised the grain with water, let the pieces dry, and then re-sanded to 400. I then finished with 1200, which was closer to burnishing or polishing than it was sanding, but it left a great surface. The next step was to glue in the magnets. The client wants to be able to mix and match the boxes, so I made sure to align the magnets such that any lid could be matched with any base. When gluing magnets like this, I like to use medium or thick CA glue. This glue is provided by Starbond and it works pretty well. The glue comes with these thin tips, which makes applications like this much easier to handle. There's an affiliate link in the description if you're interested in learning more about Starbond CA glue. The trade-off with the thicker glue, though, is that there isn't any room for it to escape like the thinner glue would have. I put a little too much in some of the holes, so I used the drill press to drive the magnets down. Some of the glue was then squeezed out the side of the boxes, but this was easily removed with a wet paper towel and some more sanding. Dense woods like these get an almost glass-like finish with just sanding. There's no need for anything crazy with the finish, so I usually use a few coats of walnut oil. I apply it with a paper towel, let it sit for a few minutes, then dry it off completely. The second and third coats were a walnut oil and wax mixture, which gives a little bit more protection than the oil alone would provide. The last step is to make the ring pillow. I've gone through a few techniques for this part of my ring boxes, and I think this is the best one I've come across. I use a single thin piece of leather and roll it up from each side. I use double-sided tape, which holds everything together securely. When rolling each end up, I make sure to leave it slightly loose, which gives the roll room to compress when putting the ring in. If you roll the leather up tightly, it will be too hard and have no give. The whole thing is then held in place with some more tape in the bottom of the box. This was one of my faster projects of late, which was a nice change of pace. The boxes turned out better than I was expecting. The design is obviously quite simple, but required some precise execution. If you're interested in seeing projects like this while they're in progress, follow me on Instagram at PrillWorks. Until next time, thanks for watching.